Well, basically this slide describes the change on the uses of the internet, which has been more rapid, and clearly the growth is coming from Asia and the developing countries. That demands all of us to think in a way new ways of using the internet after all. Also, there are new services driven by the internet, so if we think about the original target of the internet itself, it was designed for more or less machine-to-machine communication. Now people and communities especially are setting up new targets and new ways of using the internet. As David mentioned, all sorts of videos, legal or illegal, transfer is changing the nature of the internet, also the business model inside the internet. And one might say that the current way of using the internet is no longer valid in that sense. It doesn't work in the right way. If there is any problem, so it's grown out of this original design scope, and the users are changed in many ways. So there's the cost of success, is the scalability problems, as issued earlier on, David as well. Maybe the future internet, this is something based on Nokia's material. There should be a clean slave path. I know this topic is going to be presented on several workshops during this event. But anyway, radical changes are needed. There are a number of projects now touching this issue, and some sort of a more or less a revolutionary approach than evolutionary approach is needed. Coming to the present problems, of course, unbounded traffic, scalable routing, mobility and multi-homing, which is not supported at all actually on the current version. The resources and compensation, as were clearly stated out in your question, this compensation model is not working properly today. Privacy and attribution and trust and reputation. This even might be the most interesting and important part of the current issue. So how to find the right ways of having the right kind of privacy and attribution, also trust and reputation, to have enough information about the users and the services, but at the same time preserve or have enough privacy even for the future use. So in information networking, usage patterns, well, socio-economics as we are talking about here, autonomy and resilience, energy consumption, shifting bottlenecks. So why this socio-economics is critical? Well, unwanted traffic, as we saw a couple of weeks back when shutting down one of the junk mail operator, something like 70% out of the unwanted traffic dropped in one day. So it's also very easy and cheap to do something otherwise or differently. So shutting down something helps, but it's not removing the problem. So some other issues has to be considered as well. Looking up the traditional layer picture, something else than these 4 layers we all know has to be built on top of that. So the content, meaning social computing or user-generated content, and social layer, so on the impact side. Those 4 layers early on, they are not enough anymore. Some viewpoints on the issues. So users, groups and communities, with some very simple and basic tools, but supporting the social interaction, they have become a very common tools for everyday communication between friends and family. So it's important to notice that internet is no longer a communication between third parties, so meaning services and organizations or companies, but second parties, so real people and groups and informal or formal communities. When creating the future internet, these characteristics has to be taken into consideration, and this is the most important, I guess, today. So we see that a few further research is needed, especially in the areas of social networking, personalization and personal service portfolios, adaptation, well, auto-configuration, incentives and service economy. And privacy is not just about managing the visibility of one's personal information, but about constructing, managing and displaying a public digital identity. That's a very important issue. Martti is stating out here that we like to build an invisible hand that guides the various kinds of network users towards a behavior that maximizes the common good in accordance to values such as openness, democracy, equal access and fairness. Sorry?
You're stepping back.
Yes.
From an economic point of view.
Actually, yes. So this topic was more or less touched in the panel this morning. It seems really that we are stepping back. That's true. Yes. Well, who should then invest? Should there be a public road in a way that the governments should invest their money on building the networks? Well, as heard today, this is probably not the case, but maybe there should be some thoughts as well to provide something. In general, how to identify fairer stakeholders in general, that's, well, it's a problem today. And using the future internet, how to make best use of the capacity and resources. Well, now the capacity is used the way who sees it's the most suitable at the moment. So there's no clear way of using that. And what kind of incentives, as mentioned earlier on, these incentives are missing, so they are only covering the parts where the money lies already. So in California, more or less, or locally, more or less, even Europe, there are places like that. And how to achieve very low transaction costs. Well, there are certain models, but difficult to deploy globally because too many players are in the middle. So the level of privacy protection defines what kind of end user information can be collected and how it can be used. And if the market is efficient, end users have no incentives to manipulate artificially their profiles. Well, this might be true, but what are again the incentives? And is the level of privacy protection too high or too low from economics viewpoint? So, well, there are two sides. The consumer itself or the business side itself, or other sides as well, the governmental side as well. And should there be a market for privacy? How should it operate? So how to create an efficient information market that facilitates the efficient use of distributed resources? And what kind of service contracts should be used between companies? Well, this one is even more difficult to find ways of agreeing something automatically or semi-automatically between services. That's how they will change money or any other incentives. This might happen in an environment which is regulated heavily or somehow in a steady phase, but I'm afraid that it's not today or even tomorrow's issue on the internet. As present, we suppose that the cooperation of various kinds of stakeholders and entities that manage various kinds of network resources is working. Well, basically it's working, but it's going to not in a better state. But when these entities, or number of the entities are growing, what's going to happen? So it's going to be more complex. And how are the responsibilities and expectations of each spelled out and managed? And how are the possible disputes handled?